welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of the 11th of March 2006. The first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Turpin?
Thank you, Chair. I'm subbing for Councillor Pearce this evening.
Thank you. Any more apologies?
Councillor Nang is running a little bit late. He's on his way.
Okay, thank you. Are the records of the meeting held on the 11th of February 2025 approved? Item 3 on the agenda. I can confirm that there are no late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 4. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Etheridge?
Thank you, Chair. My standard declaration, please.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer?
Yeah, thank you. Item 6, pecuniary interest in that I have a business and property 20 metres away from the site.
Okay, thank you. Dave Harris?
Chair, I know this is for members' interest, but just to be clear, in terms of item 7 and the Shaftesbury House application, I used to work in a pub in the village up until about 12 years ago, and as a result, I know lots of people in the village, and I believe some of them have commented on this application. I'm not sure, but because of that that relationship and that previous employee, I don't have any involvement on any applications in Lower Upnor, and that includes the one on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Before beginning the main part of the agenda, is it agreed by committee members that Councillor Price speaks on agenda item 5, Councillor Pearce, Sands, Croser and Spalding speak on agenda item 6, and Councillor Williams to speak as ward member on agenda item 7 in that order? Thank you. We now go to the first planning application, which is agenda item 5, the old gas works at the Strand. Nick Roberts, principal planner, will be presenting this application. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So as mentioned, the first application on the agenda is for the former gas holders in Gillingham. Before I start the presentation, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the supplementary agenda. There's a couple of items. Members may have noticed that the report was duplicated within the agenda, and there was no site map, but the duplication of the report doesn't change anything in relation to the consideration of the application. And also on page 49 of the agenda's report pack, there's just an amendment to the title of one of the headings. So it states Principle of Food Store, but it should read Principle of Food Store and Class E floor space. So moving on to the application itself, as mentioned, it's for the former gasworks in Gillingham. We've got the site outlined in red on this plan here. Moving on to an aerial image of the application site. Again, we've got the site outlined in red here. You can see the existing gas infrastructure within the site itself, and also the existing sailing club, Seager Sailing Club here. To the north, you've got Gillingham Marina and the River Medway. To the east, you've got the Strand Lido and Leisure Park, and immediately adjacent to the site, you've got the council-owned land, which is currently occupied by Medway Water Sports and Medway Cruising Club. To the south, we have the Strand Roundabout, Pier Road, and the residential development of Gillingham Beyond. And to the west, we have access into Gillingham Marina, the car dealerships here, so Trust Ford, and then beyond that we have Victory Pier and Chatham Waters. So just touching very briefly on the policy context. So the map on the left-hand side is a plan from the emerging local plan. So it is the site is in here. It's a site allocation GN6 for a mixed-use scheme of up to 500 homes. And then on the right-hand side, we have a snippet from the current adopted local plan. And again, as you can see, the site is in here. It is a site located within the urban settlement boundary. So in terms of the policy context, it adopts a brownfield first approach as supported by the current adopted local plan, the emerging local plan, and indeed the MPPF. So moving on to some site photos. So this is a site photo from Pier Road, looking towards the site. So you've got the gas holder here, you've got the Strand roundabout here, and you've got the Strand Leisure Park in here. A photo in the opposite direction. So again, looking back towards the site. So we have the student accommodation that fronts Pier Road along here, and the site in the distance. And then a photo taken from within the Strand Leisure Park itself. So again, the site directly in front of you, you've got the Lido here, and in the distance you can just make out Victory Pier. This is a longer distance photo from across the opposite side of the river. So this is near Hoo Marina. So you've got St Mary's Island here, you've got Chatham Waters here, you've got Victory Pier here, and the site would fall roughly in this location here. Then we have a photo of the site entrance, a photo from the adjacent land parcel. So this is the land currently occupied by the Cruising Club and Medway Water Sports, with the Seagas Clubhouse in the distance. And then finally, just an aerial image just to provide that additional context. So as mentioned, we've got the Strand Lido and Leisure Park, the existing sailing clubs, Gillingham Marina, and Victory Pier beyond. So this is an extent plan, and this purely distinguishes the detailed application boundary from the outline application boundary. So what we have in terms of the application itself, it is a hybrid application which combines both full and outline elements. And in terms of the full permission, that consists of a new food retail store, an SGN facility, an associated public realm and access. And then the outline elements are for up to 500 dwellings, a later living accommodation, commercial uses within the ground floor of the residential, and associated access and public realm with all matters reserved. And the yellow identifies the detailed application boundary, and the pink, the outline application boundary. So this is the building heights parameter plan. So just to be clear, this is an indicative plan, and it does not form part of the approved plan, but it shows how the development could be accommodated on the site. Now, this will be subject to further consideration at reserve matter stage, which will be supported by further testing. It's actually testing in relation to the massing approach in consultation with the council's urban design officers. So although it shows indicative story heights, this will not form part of the approved plan. However, in allocating a site for up to 500 units, and given the viability position, we acknowledge that there is going to be some significant density in terms of building heights on this site. So moving on to the proposed site plan. So this is for the detailed elements. So you've got the proposed food store here with the associated car park. You've got access into the site from Strand Approach Road. You've got the landscaping around the periphery. You've then got the proposed SGN facility and associated compound here with access onto Pier Road. Now, this is a existing historical access, so will be reutilising the existing access. And then we have some public realm improvements through here, so a pedestrian and cycle link which adjoins the site to Pier Road. And there's an existing bus stop on Pier Road roughly in this location, and there are contributions that will be secured to improving that bus stop. So moving on to the elevations. So these are the 2 secs. Okay, so this is the proposed elevations for the SGN offices. On the ground floor, you've got the storage and the lobby area entrance, and then on the first floor you've got the office rooms and general amenity linked to that office space. And then we have some indicative CGIs. There was, sorry members, there was a slide that showed proposed elevations for the retail store as well, which is why I stumbled in the presentation, which don't appear to be on there. But again, they're typical of what you would expect for a food retail store. So moving on to the illustrative landscape master plan. So as mentioned on previous slides, we have the area hashed in pink here, which distinguish the full permission from the outline. So in terms of the outline areas, what you see is indicative, but what it demonstrates is the overall landscaping approach, including the ground floor plane and also the podium areas. There's also connections proposed into the adjacent site, so Gillingham Marina. So when that site comes forward, we can achieve that continuous link through. Obviously, a link through to the Strand, and also there's a link proposed in this corner here as well. And then in terms of the indicative sailing club relocation, so Sagas are currently occupying the site, so they would be displaced as a result of the development. So what we have secured is the relocation of Sagas to the adjacent land, which is owned by the council. So we've got the existing building here, which is the clubhouse for the Medway Cruising Club. The proposal is to extend off of that existing clubhouse to provide shared facilities for both Sagas and Medway water sports. Now, this doesn't form part of the application, so this would be subject to a separate process. But what it ensures is the continued integrity and continuity of the sailing club. And then just moving on to some indicative CGIs. So as mentioned, the general massing approach and heights are subject to further consideration at reserved matter stage, but this gives you a rough indication of the overall material palette. Again, CGI from within the site in terms of the public realm and ground floor plane, as well as the buildings themselves. And this is an artist's impression of the link between the site from Pier Road. So in summary, the report sets out in detail the reasons for the recommendation of approval, alongside the heads of terms for the Section 106 and associated conditions linked to both the full and outline elements. Now, this is a heavily constrained site which presents significant costs in respect to its redevelopment, and members will be aware of the challenges that regenerating brownfield sites presents. In respect to this site, particularly in relation to contamination and the cost of repairing the seawall. As such, a viability assessment was submitted alongside the application, which has been reviewed in detail by the council's consultants. And in summary, this has resulted in reduced Section 106 contributions, which are set out in the committee report, and no affordable housing provision. However, contributions are directed to the SAMS mitigation, to improvements to the Lido and Strand Leisure Park, and also the Commodore's Hard Slipway. There is also a clawback within the Section 106 agreement, which will require a late-stage viability assessment, which will enable us to identify any surplus profits that could then be redirected towards further contributions. So just to conclude, as set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement, the conditions set out and those amendments as mentioned within the supplementary agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Just go over to Dave Harris.
Chair, thank you very much. Just seeking also delegated authority to, in relation to those heads of agreement, and specifically in relation to the CGAS aspect and delivery of that, and maybe to do some minor amendments to those heads, possibly look at conditions as opposed to agreement. But if I can have that delegated authority to work with the legal team on that, Chair.
Yeah, is that agreed by members that an extra condition's put on with regards to the CGAS? Sorry, do you want to come in, Councillor Filmer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think this is very good use of a brownfield site. You know, when we look at some of the sites, most people know this site very well and it needs something done with it.
Sorry,
This will
Councillor Filmer, I thought you wanted to comment on that.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
No.
Sorry, apologies. I thought it was a comment about the condition. Councillor Price is going to speak first as ward member. So, but yeah, that was agreed by members for a condition to be put on with regards to CGAS being dealt with with the legal, well, the agreement they had, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So Councillor Price, we now go over to you. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thought Councillor Filmer had like adopted Gillingham North Ward as ward councillor, but obviously not. Anyway, thank you for allowing me members to address the committee. I'd like to start off by referring to the close working that my ward colleague, Councillor Leah Mandarakis, and I, along with Nishaba Khan, MP for Gillingham and Rainham, have had with Seagas Sailing Club on behalf of both them and Medway Water Sports Trust, also the planning department at Medway Council and Bluebell Homes, who are the developer. As a ward councillor for Gillingham North, I am in favour of the development, as we need the extra homes, a store and later living accommodation, as long as, and this is the main point I wanted to get across to you, and this will be picked up by my ward colleague, Councillor Hammond-Ishii, who's on this committee later, as long as we can secure residents' continued access to the River Medway through the continued activities and operation of Seagas Sailing Club and Medway Water Sports Trust, or their successors. I understand that there were 10 points which were agreed in a meeting between Seagas Sailing Club, Medway Planning and Bluebell Homes, of which a number are incorporated in the conditions set out within this report. I'm not going to touch on the ones which appear to have been left out because Councillor Hammond-Ishii is going to pick up on those, but I will just make reference to the ones that I understand via Seagas Sailing Club, who've looked closely into this, that the redevelopment would be such as to not interfere with the ability of Seagas Sailing Club and Medway Water Sports Trust to deliver their respective services throughout the development stages. There will be a new clubhouse and also in an early phase of the staged site redevelopment. There's going to be levelling of the land, and Bluebell Homes are going to provide multiple points access to water and power within the new yard. A right-of-way will be created for the transfer of boats from the seaward entrance to Seagas Sailing Club and Medway Water Sports to and around the creek. And I won't steal the thunder of Councillor Hammond-Ishii on 4 items which appear to have been left out of the report, which we would like to be included explicitly rather than just proceeding on an assumption that it is implicitly agreed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Now, any member, Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. And apologies, Councillor Price. I certainly agree with what the ward councillor is saying. Brownfield site like this needs to be worked on. I understand the implications regarding the contamination and so the amount of 106 money that we can get. But when you look at a site in that location where it has highways and bus transport and everything else, it's a sensible thing that we progress sites like this, and it's a big chunk of housing, which hopefully will fit in with the rest of that road with a student accommodation, and it should look very nice. So totally in agreement with the ward councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond-Ishii.
Yeah, thank you for that report. And just to follow up on my colleagues, Councillor Price's comments, continuity matters for all residents of Medway, particularly when we are having large-scale development taking place. So there are a few items I want to raise to the floor. These are the matters that were agreed between the parties, particularly Seagas Sailing Club and Medway Water Sports Trust, because I didn't see them particularly noted within the the report. So there are 4 items I want assurances that they're going to be included in there. The first one being the remediation of the North Warren Creek to allow for Bluebell Homes will provide approximately 34 ladders with small lock gates and a riser poles to facilitate the mooring of craft around the creek wall. These are all, by the way, agreements that were agreed beforehand, and I'm surprised they didn't make it to the report. The maintenance, number 2, the maintenance of these ladders and poles will be the responsibility of Seagas Sailing Club. Number 3, Bluebell Homes will provide access to water and power at the creek side. And lastly, a lease or similar agreement with nominal peppercorn rent, allowing for Seagas Sailing Club, Medway Water Sports Trust to operate from the creek, including land for the pillar crane. This lease to stand for the life of the respective clubs. So those are the 4 assurances that we really want to see carried forward. And also my own question is around the geological survey. Understand there could be I can't pronounce the word, French Napoleonic prisoners of war graves on the site. So I need some sort of assurances in terms of what sort of work is going to take place to discover the amount of graves that are there, and what sort of work needs to be done to secure the site moving forward. Thank you.
Dave, do you want to come in on that?
Chair, thank you very much. Councillor Hammond-Dishi, totally understand and agree with the points that you've said and Councillor Price has said. And they are agreements that have taken place in writing between Blueberry Homes, Seagas, and my department. The reason they're not specifically stated in the report that you see in front of you is because Seagas is technically a private company rather than a public community use, and therefore it is difficult to address those issues specifically within a section 106. However, what I'm seeking here is to get delegated authority to work in relation to a condition, which is what the chairman referred to, which will secure the agreement along the lines that you and Councillor Price and Blueberry Homes and Seagas and the council have worked on for a couple of years now. So to achieve all of that. So that's what I'm seeking delegated authority for. In relation to the potential, and it's no more than a potential for bodies there, we have been approached by a company who have provided burial facilities elsewhere for these in relation to other development. We have forwarded that to the applicant. We'll make sure that when the development comes forward, if any are uncovered, then appropriate relocation of the bodies will take place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Golvin?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers not only for the comprehensive presentation this evening, but for the report that's within the very detailed and comprehensive report that's within the agenda. So it's probably me that's not understanding it properly. The 500 dwellings, does that include the 140 for the older persons accommodation, or is that additional to the 100 to the 500, please? In addition, well, it's still a good deal, because I think by providing that facility, in one way or another, that's going to provide up to another 140 family homes here in Medway, presuming that most of them will come from Medway. Going back to what my colleague was saying, I think this is almost a classic brownfield site. It's good to see such an imaginative use of the site. The height of the buildings, proposed buildings for the second phase, I wouldn't have any problem with, because if you look at the photograph taken from the Strand, Gillingham Pier, the Berkeley Homes development, you can hardly notice that at all. And in fact, I think we missed a trick when Berkeley Homes came back to us a few years ago and asked for some extra height in those buildings. I think that site actually could have taken them, and this one certainly can. And putting tall buildings on a waterfront is nothing new. The Victorians but certainly very good at that. You've only got to look at the waterfront at Liverpool to see a 100-year plus example of how it can be done. I think also, though, this does prove the point that, and which I'm going to make a bit later on the next item, of how difficult it is to get a full Section 106 out of brownfield sites. It's, we desperately need affordable accommodation for people in Medway, and we're not going to get them out of the sites. And it sounds very good in the local plans to put the predominance on, first of all, on brownfield sites, but that won't produce the variety of homes we actually need, unfortunately. And ex-gas work sites are notorious for the amount of pollution. In order to clean the gas up to go into the distribution mains, into people's homes, they use cyanide and lime to clean the gas. And I believe in the gas trade it was called Blue Billy, because if you've got too much of it, you went blue. So these things are very, very difficult to do. But to sum up, I think this is a good quality development by the looks of it. It will certainly fit in with the rest of the street scene along Pier Road. I must admit, it did take me quite a few years to get used to those bright coloured panels on the student accommodation, but now I've driven past it so many times, it doesn't jar so much. And yeah, I think this is to be very much welcomed, and I'm pleased to hear that the Ward Councillor's concerns over the access to the river with the cruising club and the sailing club will be sorted, because they're absolutely right. We do need to ensure access to the river. We don't make enough use of our river here in Medway, and the refurbishment of Commodore's hard out of this is very much to be welcomed as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. I must say I disagree about the height, because I think it's far too tall, as you are all aware, because at Design Review Panel it did actually say at that point the height should be going right down, and as I understand it, we're not approving the heights today, are we? It's just up to 500 homes, so thank you. So now go over to Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I had two questions. One was related to the additional conditions that Councillor Hammond-Dichet was seeking, but the Chief Planning Officer has answered that by saying he will cover those under delegated powers. The second question was, is there anything we can do about affordable housing on site? Is there any grant funding that might be available given the viability assessment?
Dave, do you want to come in on that?
Chair, thank you very much. What myself and the applicant have been doing is having early discussions with both Homes England and also the council's housing team as well. As Councillor Galvin has said, in terms of viability, it's not possible to deliver affordable housing through Section 106 because you don't get grant funding for affordable homes through Section 106. However, we are already engaging with Homes England, and we will try our best still to deliver some affordable homes on site, but outside of the planning process, and hopefully using grant funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor
this committee and previous committees have been misled by developers so many times in terms of promises of retail services, schools, etc., all for it to disappear in smoke. So when we actually go forward on this proposal, can we actually guarantee there actually will be a retail centre in place and not snatched back by developers at a later stage saying it wasn't viable yet again? Thank you.
Dave, do you want to comment on that? Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. I think the difference here, Councillor Etheridge, is that the retail part is in the detailed part of the application rather than the outline, and the retail is needed to provide the funding to enable a lot of the work to take place. So absolutely, the retail will be delivered on this site.
Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the detailed presentation. I'm fully supportive of it, and I think, as my colleague Councillor Gullivan said, this is almost a classic brownfield site which needs to be developed. And I'm not too worried about the heights, but I'll leave that to others down the line. But in terms of the planning preview presentations that we went with Blueberry Homes, they explained in great detail about all the work that they have to do to make it suitable for development. Hence why the Section 106 is lacking in some respects. But I'm just interested to know whether they've given a timeline in terms of what they're going to start first in terms of the development. Is it going to be the food store? Is it going to be the SGN work? Is it going to be some of the flats or the later living? And what overall timescale have they actually proposed? Thank you.
Nick, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, no problem. So the aim is to deliver the food store first. As Dave Harris mentioned, this is almost enabling the rest of the development to come forward. So the intention is obviously for the food store to come forward first. And they do have, as far as I'm aware, a provider that's on board already to bring forward those proposals, obviously, if consent is granted.
Thank you. Any other member? No? Okay, so this, as you're all aware, this site has been allocated in the emerging local plan for development, and it is an ideal green site to be developed on. As you're all aware, I was not happy with the height, so I'm quite glad that that's taken out for now and to be decided at a later date. I'm also pleased to see that Section 106 monies have been given to the Strand to improve that, because that's been sort of neglected for quite a few years. To see improvements in there will be good. So I will therefore be supporting this application. So over to Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. The old gasworks Strand approach, Gillingham. Recommendation I'm moving is approval subject to A1 to 10, a Section 106 agreement to secure what is set out in headings 1 to 10 and all the subheadings therein, and B, conditions 1 to 63 as set out in the report. Additionally, delegated powers for the Chief Planning Officer to add any necessary extra conditions to secure the full agreement with Seagas.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Those for?
That's unanimous.
Yeah, the application is therefore approved. Before moving on to the next application, we will be taking a short break, so we're not quite sure how long it's going to last. Thank you. Agenda item, welcome back to tonight's planning committee. We're now going to move on to agenda item 6, which is a planning application land east of High Howstow. Nick Roberts, principal planner, will be presenting this application. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for the land to the east of High Howstow. Before I start the presentation, if I could just draw members' attention to the supplementary planning agenda, please. There's a number of items. So we've got revised condition wording for conditions 44, 45 and 50. We've got the removal of condition 7 relating to the power improvements or public right-of-way improvements, because these are off-site highway works and are going to be covered and secured in the Section 106 agreement. We've had a further 25 letters of objection. We've also had a case officer report rebuttal from the independence group. And within the appraisal section on the Northwood Hill SSI, page 273 of the agenda's report pack, it quotes a figure of 2.457 million towards the strategic environmental mitigation strategy. That should read 1.278 million as set out in the Section 106 heads of terms on page 196 of the agenda's report pack and as set out in the Section 106 matters on page 294 of the agenda reports pack. So moving on to the application itself. So we've got the site outlined in red. If I move on to the aerial image to provide additional context. So as mentioned, the site is outlined in red. To the north, we've got Britannia Road. To the east, we've got Charnel Street and the existing properties along Charnel Street. We've got the Hollies, the Esquire development here and a site that's come forward here, also delivered by Esquire. To the south, we've got Christmas Lane. We've got the Charnel Street roundabout. So as part of the proposal, a new arm will be coming off of this roundabout into the site. We've got Coach Barn Kennels and existing residential properties that front Christmas Lane. And then to the west, we have the existing village of High Howstow. So again, just touching on the policy context, on the left-hand side, we've got a policies map from the emerging local plan. So it's a site allocation, reference HHH26, for up to 760 homes, a new school and community and commercial uses. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a snippet from the current adopted local plan. So as you'll see, it's outside the existing settlement boundary, which is defined by the black line, and is in an open countryside, but there are no other policy designations within the site boundary itself. So in terms of ecological designations, so again, we have the site in red here. To the north, we've got the Northwood Hill SSI and the High Howstow Nature Reserve. Now, as part of the Section 106 contributions, there is mitigation towards the Northwood Hill SSI in relation to recreational disturbance, circa 1.2 million. To the east, we've got the Fisherswood Ancient Woodland here. To the south, we've got the Chatham Woods and Lodge Hill SSI, and to the west, we've got the Dallon Farm SSI. Then beyond that, we've got the Thames Estuary and Marshes, SPAs, the Ramses and the SSIs. So moving on to some site photos. So these are predominantly taken from within the site itself. So the image here in the top left corner is looking west towards the existing village. So you've got the settlement boundary with High Howstow along here. You've got a view looking east across the site towards Britannia Road, a view looking west along Christmas Lane. So you'd have the site on the right-hand side and the entrance to the existing village of High Howstow here. A photo looking north across the application site, again towards Britannia Road. A view looking south towards the Coach Barn Kennels here. And then a view looking west towards across the site. So we've got the Fisherswood Ancient Woodland here, the site itself in here, then a photo looking south across the site towards Christmas Lane. And then these are just photos taken from around the periphery. So we've got a view north from Christmas Lane. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, we've got the existing settlement boundary to High Howstow. We've got the application site in here, a view south from Britannia Road, again, existing settlement boundary and Britannia Road running through here. And this is Herridon Grange, which is a Red Rose site that was delivered 5, 6, or completed 5, I'd say roughly 5, 6 years ago. A view west from Charnel Street, so you've got the petrol filling station on Charnel Street here. You've got the ancient woodland, the Fisherswood ancient woodland here, and the site in here. And then a view north from Christmas Lane, so the Coach Barn Kennels, the existing properties that front Christmas Lane, and the site in here. So a key landscape characteristic is the site's openness. So moving on to the phasing plan. So there are 3 phases. You've got phase 1, which is a detailed, and as with the previous application, this is also a hybrid application. So the full permission relates to 270 dwellings, the local centre, open space and associated access from Christmas Lane, and the outline permission is up to 490 dwellings, a primary school, and associated open space, sustainable drainage and landscaping, with all matters reserved except access. So phase 1 in orange is the detail phase, so that's the 270 units. Then you've got the open space associated with that detailed phase. Phase 2 is in blue, with the associated open space associated with that phase, and that's circa 245 units. And then we've got phase 3 in pink, which is again within the outline, and the associated open space associated with phase 3. The area in green, that is the school phase. So the land will be prepared as part of phase 1, and the land will then be transferred to the council to bring forward as a separate reserved matters application. It will be serviced up to the site boundary, and the funds for delivering the new school are secured as part of the Section 106 agreement. So this is the proposed site plan for the detailed phase, so phase 1. So you've got access coming in from Christmas Lane, got the internal road network. You've got the proposed local centre here. So these are apartment buildings that will have commercial uses on the ground floor. You've got this village square, as it's described within the applicant's design and access statement here, which is open space between the school and the commercial units. You've then got improvements here and enhancements to the existing public right-of-way that runs through the site, with a connection into the existing village. You've got further areas of open space and such treatment here, with formal play provision here. And then you can just see the general layout in terms of the development itself. So there's 4 identified character areas, and as described by the applicant in the design and access statement. So we've got the village centre, the village, the mews, and the village fringe. And in essence, there's variation in density and street typologies as you move towards the site boundary. So it's more dense within the village centre, and the dwellings per hectare reduces as you enter towards the periphery of the site. And then these are just some elevations. So we've got the apartment buildings with the commercial on the ground floor. We've got chalet bungalows. We've got the more traditional 2-storey, 2.5-storey dwellings. Some further elevations. And again, another slide with elevation. I think that the purpose of this slide is just to show there is a housing mix. There's variation in design and material palette. And although there's no floor plans included within the presentation itself, all dwellings will meet the required space standards. And then these are just some street scene elevations as well. So moving on to the landscape master plan and open space strategy. So as mentioned previously, we've got the detailed phase as outlined in red, and I touched on the open space that will be delivered as part of that detailed phase. But then we have an indicative open space strategy for the rest of the sites. The areas in white are essentially the development parcels, and then we have the areas of open space. So they define the broad walk, as I touched on, in terms of that connection through into the existing village. We've got what they define as the meadow, we've got sort of an area of open space here, so less formal in nature, and then links continuing through here to Charnel Street with suds features, potential for allotments and formal play as well. There's also a Muga that will be proposed, or a mugger, within the school grounds. Obviously, that would be subject to further details and secured as part of the future reserved matters applications. And in addition to what's being provided on site, there are also contributions to open space within the existing village. So that's towards existing open space provision facilities, improvements to, for example, existing facilities such as the cricket club, etc. And moving on to some sections. So these are sections through the open space within the detailed element of the application. So it just gives you a feel of that, the open space, the typologies in terms of the widths and the nature of the planting as well. And then moving on to the parcel density parameter plans. So a series of parameter plans have been submitted with the application, which underpin the principles for essentially the reserved matters application. So obviously we have the detailed element here, but then we also have a density parameter plan in relation to the outline elements for phases 2 and 3. Essentially what this shows is that the density tends to be more concentrated within the centres, but will be will decrease as you exit towards the peripheries of the site. And again, a building heights parameter plan. So this just shows you the story. So with heights, so we're talking sort of up to 2.5, 3 stories. So this is a development that isn't high density, so it wouldn't be out of character. And then in terms of the proposed connections, so this just shows the proposed connections. So we've got primary route roads, which are shown in orange, running through here and here. So we've got north, south, east and west connections. We've then got the secondary roads within the development. And then we've got the pedestrian and cycle routes. So we've got routes through into the existing village, ties into the existing village here. So the new arm of the roundabout, and then also connections through from Charnel Street here and here to enable existing residents on Charnel Street safe access into the site. And then this just touches on what I mentioned in terms of the road typologies and just variation in street widths between the character areas. So these are the character areas within the detailed phase, and it just shows room for services within the footpath, the road widths, and also tree planting as well with the canopies shown at maturity. And then this relates to the off-site highway works. So we've got a new footway connection to the existing village of High Houselow here. We've got the enhancements to the public right-of-way link to the existing village and Topley Drive. We've got proposed bus stops, eastbound and westbound here and here. We've got a controlled crossing here, so the puffing crossing here, and also a controlled crossing here. And then, as mentioned, the new arm off of the roundabout with a parallel crossing, and then the continued footpath connection along Christmas Lane within the site, and then into the existing village. There's an area here which is within third party ownership, but this is a site allocation as well, Dean Lewis Estate, so this can be secured as part of when that site comes forward. And then just touching on some CGIs, so this is from within the village square or the local centre. So you've got the apartments with the commercial uses on the ground floor, the area of open space that fronts the apartments and the school. These are from around the periphery, so what they describe as the village fringe. This would be, again, the village fringe with access in through here, and then just some CGIs from within the site itself. Another one. So the report sets out in detail the reasons for the recommendation of approval, alongside the heads of terms for the Section 106 and associated conditions linked to both the full and outline elements. So in respect to the Section 106, they also reflect the developer's guide as informed by work on the evidence base to the emerging local plan, and as a comparison, based on the currently adopted guide, i.e. the guide as updated as of April last year, it would have required in the region of 17,500 per dwelling in section 106. This would be securing well in excess of that, almost 31,500 per dwelling, which in total would equate to almost 24 million in section 106 contributions, and that would include contributions towards the strategic transport, the strategic environmental mitigation, and also the funding for the new school, as well as contributions towards High Houstow itself, as well as I mentioned previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. We'll now go over to Ward Member Councillor Pearce, if he'd like to come up, who has up to 5 minutes to speak.
Have a quick drink. That's great. Ready. Thank you, Chair. This case officer report and recommendation is asking this committee to do something very risky, to approve now and to try and sort out all the problems later. That is the common link running through the whole report. The government's own specialist consultee, Active Travel England, has issued a holding objection. Why? Because key issues are still not properly resolved, including walking and cycling routes, gaps in connectivity, shared paths, cycle parking, the travel plan, and RS44 public right-of-way. The report says, on one hand, this development is acceptable, but on the other hand, it admits the specialist body for active travel is still not satisfied. That is a crucial contradiction. And what's the answer from the report? Not it's resolved. The answer is we'll deal with all the problems later by conditions, reserve matters, future plans, and future detail. That is not sound planning. That is approving unsustainable development on a wing and a prayer, a recipe for disaster. Now look at Northwood Hill SSI and National Nature Reserve. The report accepts that without mitigation, the recreational effects on the habitat would be significant. It says the fencing is central to protecting nightingales. It even notes that in 2022 there were 32 breeding pairs of nightingale, a population of national importance. But then the same report tells you the RSPB objects in principle because the costs of that fencing have still not been agreed or secured. It also tells you KCC biodiversity requires additional information before determination, including an agreed mitigation strategy with Natural England and the RSPB. So again, what are members of the committee being told? You are being told the harm is significant without mitigation. You are being told the key mitigation is still not agreed or secured. You are being told more information is still required before voting on this application. And then despite all of that, you are being asked to approve the development anyway. That is not a solid recommendation. It's irresponsible. Then there's Fisher's Wood Ancient Woodland. The report accepts that this is an irreplaceable habitat. It says the current buffer varies between 15 and 21 metres. Then it says a minimum 20-metre buffer is sought by condition, and the detailed buffer, planting and mitigation will be worked out later at the reserve matters stage. So which is it? Is the woodland edge buffer acceptable now, or does it still need to be fixed later? Because it can't honestly be both. And that is the problem with this whole contradictory report. It keeps saying, this is acceptable, but also this still needs more work. This harm can be mitigated, but also the mitigation is not yet fully agreed and settled. This is ready for approval, but also the important details will come later. If the report and recommendation was truly confident this scheme was sustainable, there would not be the need to rely on so heavily on conditions, future plans, reserve matters, and a later legal agreement to rescue it. The committee has been asked to approve a major unsustainable development, doubling the size of the village in the rural countryside, while the active travel statutory body still objects, the RSPB still objects in principle, biodiversity officers still want more information before determination, and critical mitigation is being pushed down the road. That is not good enough. It's not good enough for local residents, and it's certainly not good enough for the highly environmentally sensitive Hoo Peninsula. This application is simply not ready for determination. This report and recommendation is not robust and it's not sound. And this committee should not be bounced into approving first and asking questions later. So I urge the committee to refuse this application on unsustainable and legal non-compliance grounds, or at the very least, defer until the contradictions and critical matters in the report are resolved and the mitigation is actually agreed and secured. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. We'll now go over to Councillor Sands, who has 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to leave the forensic analysis of this application to my colleagues. I want to talk to you about a village that will be destroyed if this application is approved. High Halstow is not just another dot on a plan. It is one of the most elevated settlements on the Hoo Peninsula, standing proudly between the mighty Medway and Thames rivers. It's a rural village with a long and distinctive history, a place that has been shaped over centuries, not by speculation or sprawl, but by landscape, agriculture, community and heritage. Even the name speaks to that history. Halstow, understood to be the Old English to mean holy place. The village dates back to early Saxon times. It appears in the 11th century Domesday Book and has played a major part in some of the most significant moments in our county's story, from the days of Jack Cade's rebellion in 1450 to the Wyatt uprising in 1554. High Halstow has had a proud record of standing up to governments and to bad decisions, and those that would do it harm. This is a village with a real past and real character, and that matters, because what is being proposed here is not a small addition to a village. It's a development with such scale that would permanently alter the character of High Halstow, and it will accelerate the urbanisation of our rural areas. This is not careful planning, but a headlong rush. A rush driven by pressure from governments, by developer ambition and greed, and not by good planning. Residents are entitled to ask, where in all of this is the thought for the people who already live here, the thought for the infrastructure that is already under strain, for the basic quality of life of existing residents? Because the communities like High Halstow should not be simply expected to absorb vast change on trust. And that brings me to affordability. We know that every time an application like this comes forward, members are reminded about the shameful situation of children and families in temporary accommodation. This is a real issue, and it's an embarrassment to Medway, and nobody should minimise it. But members, you must ask the simple question, who are these new homes for? A two-bedroom home is being marketed at around £350,000. A three-bedroom home around £485,000. And so homes up to £825,000. How many local families are these properties realistically going to help? These properties are not for local people. And even when we hear the phrase affordable housing, residents know from experience that the so-called affordability can still be completely out of reach for many of the very people that need it the most. So this cannot be simply waved through as an obvious answer to Medway's council housing problem. It's all right to, It is also right to say that many residents see this proposal as an attempt to get ahead of the local plan, and their concern is understandable, because once development of this scale is approved, the character of the village is changed forever. You can't undo it. You can't put back the agricultural fields and the rural setting or the historic entity. Tonight, members, you have a choice. You can choose to allow this development to be forced through ahead of a proper local plan, or you can stand with the people of High Halstow and respect the character of this historic rural village and say to this decision should not be rushed. For those reasons, I ask you to refuse or at very least defer this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sands. Now move over to Councillor Croser, who has 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Chair, this application has been sitting with planning for 3 years, yet the 107-page officer's report was published just days ago. This rush to the finish line on a scheme that doubles the size of a village is not just unfair to the community, it's a risk to this committee. Bringing this application now is a blatant attempt to bypass the examination in public of the emerging local plan. By deciding this today, you are effectively deciding the soundness of policy SA9 before the independent inspectors have even looked at it. If you approve this tonight, you are not following the plan, you are preempting it. All we are asking is for a refusal or a deferral. Let the inspectors do their job so that your decision rests on a solid, independent evidence base rather than a premature one. The planning officer's report before you relies on a staggering 72 conditions and £24 million of Section 106 contributions. But let's look closer at the Four Elms Hill Junction. The report suggests that 6.8 million contribution is enough. However, the previous HIF data suggests that the actual cost for peninsula mitigation is well over £100 million. The 350 home trigger, condition 72, allows for 350 homes to be occupied before the strategic highway mitigation is even operational. Where is the evidence that Four Elms, which is already failing, can handle another 350 homes without this work? Furthermore, Madam Chair, SIL Regulation 122 legally requires Medway to ensure that every penny of that £24 million is necessary and directly related. Yet there is no viability assessment, no certificate confirming these tests are met. This committee is being asked to sign a blank cheque on faith alone. Madam Chair, much of what matters, the actual delivery of infrastructure, is burdened in Grampian conditions, conditions that prevent development until something else happens. There is a direct contradiction in the paperwork. The application says that the first 250 units will take 7 years. The report says 320 units in 5 years. If the numbers do not add up, the substantial weight given to housing delivery is built on sand. You cannot grant very substantial weight to a delivery timeline that the applicant's own transport assessment contradicts. Madam Chair, can I ask officers the following 5 questions that I've summarised here, but I've sent to Dave and the team this morning. The first one, you've requested £24 million in Section 106 contributions across 13 heads of terms. Can you confirm if a formal SIL Regulation 122 compliance statement has been produced for each of these? Question 2, the applicant's own transport assessment states that they will deliver 250 units in 7 years, yet the report bases its substantial positive weight on a delivery of 320 units in 5 years. Which figure is correct? Question 3, what empirical evidence do you have that the local network can absorb another 700 plus cars without the mitigation in place? Why was the trigger set at 350 specifically? Question 4, do you truly believe that 5 working days is a fair and reasonable period for the community to digest 107 pages of technical content? Madam Chair and members, this is the most controversial allocation in the emerging local plan. To push it through now, days after the report was released, and just a few months before the examination in public, to me feels like cheating the system. My last question, therefore. This site is policy SA9 in the emerging local plan, which is currently heading to public examination. If you approve this tonight, aren't we effectively usurping the role of the independent inspectors? Why is it so important to Medway to determine this report today, rather than waiting to confirm if the inspectors even find this sound? It deprives the public of their democratic right to an independent hearing, and I respectfully ask for you to refuse this or at least defer it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Croser. Councillor Spalding, you now have 5 minutes to speak when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, 3 weeks ago, I and others attended a presentation on this application to help us understand it. The feeling in the room, summed up by words, I don't think you're completely there yet. Nothing has changed in those 3 weeks. 8 days ago, you've heard it, the officer's report landed. All 107 pages of it, 72 conditions, a Section 106 proposal of no less than 16 elements to be read in its entirety with the 454 documents on the planning portal, several of which are over 100 pages long. Now, when I've sat here before you previously, you've always had a lobbying document in advance. What I'm going to say in my 5 minutes, not this time, it's simply impossible to make proper representations in those 8 days, or as Councillor Croser refers to, the 5 working days. Not being given enough time is, I submit, a procedural flaw. But it's a procedural flaw that can be remedied. Have all members on this committee actually read all of the report and all of the documents? In the past, Councillor Jones quite fairly has made the point we have the officer's adequate report to work from. But is it adequate? Sat here twice telling you why you can't put a development in virtually the same place. And the first time, I referred to the planning history. Numerous applications in that area have refused. 5 went to appeal. All the appeals were dismissed. And since then, we've had 2 more. MC 250381 and 2045 refused, appeals dismissed. And what planning history have we got here? 2. Environmental information reports. If an officer's report fails to provide sufficient information before members, any decision you make could be unlawful. That is established law. Is there sufficient information there? Absolutely not. Now, another aspect from sitting here before members was taking the line for the need for social housing. It's been touched on by my colleagues. Think of the children, came the cries. Fair enough. We're told the applicant has taken on board the requirements of the new local plan, but apparently only the ones it wants. New local plan wants 30% of social housing on this type of field and greenbelt application. We're getting 25. Hang on a minute. On this side, that's 38 homes. Is this committee going to abandon the children of 38 families currently in temporary accommodation? And the headline's an inherent danger, allowing only 25% on this application. And Councillor Croser has touched on the wider issues. You enshrine a detail of new plan, but you create a precedent. A precedent, I suggest, affects the validity of all new applications. How many are going to come forward and say, actually, we're not going to give you 30 because you've already done this and you can have 25? Now, I represent the ward next door to this application, including the wonderful parish of St Mary Hoo, which is going to bear the brunt of all the knock-on effects of this development. St Mary Hoo Parish Council may have put some application, big detail in, but it was not formally consulted, procedural flaw. I could find no mention of the Fen Corner roundabout. You know, it's the one with the green alien on, you've seen it in the press. It wasn't in the officer's report. No mention of developments or the roads north of the peninsula in the transport documents or the officer report. None of that. Now, when Fen Corner first came to the committee, Councillor Peake was succinct. He didn't know the area, he wanted to be careful and diligent. He wanted the benefit of a site visit. His words were prevalent. You have the officer's report telling you one thing and the ward councillors telling you something else. Well, tonight, members, you haven't just got one ward councillor telling you something's wrong with this. You've got 4 of us. 4 of us who have either lived or worked out there for years, and we know that area. Members, I submit you cannot tonight approve. You can defer, or, as invited by my colleagues, you can refuse. You defer to allow time for proper detailed ward councillor representations. You defer to allow the planning officer perhaps updated report. 2 should be about 22. You defer so any flaws can be remedied. You defer if anyone wants a site visit. This application has been around since 2023, you heard it. Another couple of months isn't going to bother the developer, really? Is the application completely there yet? No, it is not. This is an application, when you listen, and you heard Councillor Sands on the value of the houses, worth hundreds of millions of pounds. But most importantly, you defer because you allow the applicant of this hundreds of millions of pounds application to consider 38 extra social dwellings to take possibly 100 children out of the temporary accommodation. But above all else, you take everything into account and you defer because it's definitely the right thing to do. Madam Chair, as ever, I'm obliged.
Thank you, Councillor Spalding. I now open the floor to members. Any members? Councillor Goldwyn.
Could we have the officers' answers to the question that the last council member put forward? That might help us in our decision-making process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, yeah.
Chair, thank you very much. Members, I'm going to specifically address those 5 questions. £24 million Section 106 contributions across 13 heads of terms. Has a formal SIL Regulation 122 compliance statement been produced for each of those? Yes, every one of those contributions has been assessed against Regulation 122, as with all the applications currently at appeal going to public inquiry. All of those applications and agreements have been assessed against Regulation 122. The second part of that first question is about £6.8 million for the Four Elms Junction. That's as Councillor Crozer says, that won't cover the improvements to that junction. It's a proportional contribution to it. So we have looked at the local plan, we have looked at the allocations within the plan and the impact on junctions, and we have proportioned those costs out. Now, for this application, that equates to £6.8 million. Part of it, by agreeing the application, we will demonstrate to funding people that those improvements, much needed, as Councillor Crozer and the ward councillors have said, can come forward and can be funded. So we could bring forward funding, which will then be paid back through contributions such as this. In relation to the contradictory evidence that Councillor Crozer points out about the 250 units in 7 years compared to the 320 units in 5 years, the question was, if the applicant's slower timeline is the reality, doesn't that fundamentally undermine the tilted balance argument that we've used to the officers have used to recommend approval? No is the answer to that. The tilted balance relates to the things like, have you got a 5-year housing land supply, which is a requirement? No, we haven't. We've got 2.9 years, significantly lower than 5 years. Do we comply with the housing delivery test? Where if we're under 75% of our meeting our need, then there is this presumption in favour of sustainable development. We're at 72%. There is a significant emphasis in terms of delivery of homes, which provides that tilted balance. In relation to the 320 units, that is based on information that was supplied for my local plan team in relation to the local plan for the whole allocation. So that includes the Dean Lewis site. It also includes the possibility that this site, which was originally Redrow, but now we know that Redrow are part of the Barratt Group, could be brought forward by more than one developer. That is why there is a difference between 250 and 350. In terms of preempting the local plan inspectors, we have taken KC advice on that from two different barristers. One was the barrister that we're working with in relation to defending appeals that we're under at the moment, appeals for speculative house building at Wainscott and at Who, but also in relation to the fact that members are aware of this. Can I say that we're under attack? Certainly, the cameras are on us today. There will be developers, applicants, land promoters watching this and watching what members' decision is. And if you refuse this application tonight, that decision will be used against you, or against me, because I'll be the one sitting in front of inspectors, I'll be sitting in front of barristers, defending those appeals. And members know where those appeals are, and you know where those speculative applications are coming, and there are more in the pipeline as well. In relation to that predetermining, yes, I do understand the difficulty there. We are just a month, 2 months away from the examination, but the application hasn't been rushed. It has been with us for over 2 years. The applicants have not agreed a further extension to the processing of this application, which means that they can appeal against non-determination. We're then in appeal position, and we're back here in front of committee asking what would your decision be on that application. I would also advise members that we're clearly, just because we've got a local plan examination coming up, we've still got to determine applications. We've still got to deliver homes for Medway. Now, as I said, the inquiries coming up, the appellants will be arguing you haven't got a 5-year housing land supply. You're not delivering on your housing need. You've only got 2.9 years. That's significant shortfall. Now, with the local plan sites, the allocated sites such as these, we can take that up to 3.7 years based on a step trajectory over the first 5 years. A step trajectory is where we deliver slower in those first 5 years while we're getting the infrastructure, which is much needed. As all the ward councillors says, that infrastructure is much needed. While we're delivering that, and then there is the acceleration of delivery after that to get us up to 5 years. That's something which our barrister has said is an appropriate mechanism. We have also taken advice from the Planning Inspectorate and the Planning Advisory Service in relation to that approach. In terms of the 350 loophole and the 350 homes, I think we all know the pressure on Four Elms roundabout, particularly as you're coming from London or from the Sansparell roundabout to there, the queues that are there in the morning and evening. And I'm not going to argue with that. I can't do it. The evidence is there. But what we're trying to do is to mitigate that through delivering development which delivers the money needed to do the much needed improvements to those roundabouts and other roundabouts in the area, including Sansparell, including Main Road, including Bells Lane, including Ropers Lane roundabouts. The 350, as I said, relates to that local plan trigger. I think the other question in terms of the timescale for the application, in terms of the producing of the officer's report, we have complied with the legal requirement, and Wayne Hemingway can maybe comment upon that. But in terms of whether members have had an opportunity to consider the application, it's been with us for 2 years. We've received comments on it. Members have considered it. Ward councillors have considered it. Parish councillors have considered it. They've given their comments, and we've reflected those, and they're important comments. We've reflected those in the officers' reports. So members, myself and my team and the legal officers and the KC that we are have engaged both for the public inquiries coming up and for the local planning examination, advise that it is appropriate for members to determine this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been a very interesting contribution from the ward councillors, and I'd like to make another interesting contribution. A few years back, somebody on the back of a napkin decided £171 million was ideal for a HIF project. And from that HIF project, we were going to get a brand new railway station, car park, bus services, and a link line coming back into Strood. Additionally, within that money, we were going to get new railway carriages that were going to take our passengers up to Northfleet or Gravesend. Total cost of that, over £100 million. So when you take that into account, along with the proposed roadworks funding, the 171 was never enough. But of course, we didn't have 171. We'd already wasted almost 20 million in Wainscott alone, just doing a survey on a flyover. We wasted another 5 million looking at bus rerouting through Wainscott Village itself. So the myth that keeps being put out that 171 million was taken away from us, it wasn't. It was because it was totally not viable. Developments of this size at that time were based on the fact that we would get the road infrastructure in place first, along with a railway station. None of that has happened, and therefore I'm quite prepared to say we should defer this application because it's totally not viable. Thank you.
Councillor Hammond-Ishai.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate that this is a extremely sensitive development proposal. I totally get it. My questions are to do with some of the reservations and reasons to not proceed at this stage, and that's centered around the wastewater and drainage issues. So I've got three particular questions. The report says High Hostel must grow in a sustainable way, not just in terms of, say, infrastructure. Population is aging as well. We do need to have something viable for the next generation to prosper. If that in mind, can you confirm the drainage conditions enforce that? The report basically says high hostels must grow in a sustainable way with infrastructure in place at the right time. So can you confirm the drainage conditions enforce that? Because when I was reading it through, I couldn't detect where the enforceability comes in, meaning homes can only be occupied once the drainage system is actually ready. That's question number one. Question number two, can officers confirm that the drainage and flood risk assessments in the report covers all the risks identified in the papers and not just on the map where it said flood zone 1, because water travels on the path of least resistance. So I want to know how detailed is that, that flood risk assessment. And lastly, Southern Water say in the papers that extra flows could increase the risk of foul flooding and that off-site upgrades may be needed. So once again, can officers confirm the conditions to make sure no homes are lived in until Southern Water completes those upgrades? Is that written in the conditions? Again, I didn't see that upgrades must be done before anyone can occupy any of the homes. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to comment. So, as set out in the report, there's no secret. Southern Water's representation is included within there. they identify insufficient valve capacity in relation to this particular site, which requires off-site reinforcement. So there are conditions there linked to the detailed foul drainage, which are required prior to commencement of development, so i.e. before a spade goes in the ground. So the applicant is aware of their obligations in relation to Southern Water and what they will need to do in terms of ensuring that there is that adequate infrastructure in place for when, obviously, the properties are occupied.
The other two questions I had, one was around the flood zone 1, around the risk assessment piece there as well.
Yes, so this is an EIA development, so it was submitted with an environmental statement, and as part of that process, we appointed our own independent consultant to review, i.e. an EIA specialist, to review the environmental statement and the associated documents linked to that. So in terms of obviously the documents that are submitted in relation to flood risk and drainage, they are robust, they're resilient, and as far as we're concerned, we have no concerns in terms of the methodology that they adopted in relation to those particular assessments.
Okay, and then the first one was just a general one in terms of the sustainability of the infrastructure around the drainage systems. Are you confident that the proposal sets out the right mitigations to ensure that it's okay?
Yes, and I mean that will be secured by a condition in consultation with the likes of Southern Water. So in relation to the drainage conditions, we would be consulting Southern Water on those details. So we wouldn't be discharging anything that wasn't approved or had the necessary agreement by Southern Water.
Thank you.
Councillor Golvin, did you want to speak? Yep.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is a very sensitive application. I fully appreciate that. And I also appreciate that people who've got used to living in one place that they love want to hang on to it as it is at the moment. But the reality is, in this country, we have not built enough homes for people for the last 40 or 50 years. We have a chronic housing crisis, not just in Medway, but across the country. As the Chief Planning Officer outlined a few minutes ago, we have not got sufficient allocated land that could supply the needs of Medway people. And although we've got this urban myth that the vast majority of new homes in Medway go to Londoners, the fact is they don't. It's around about 80% go to local Medway people. Yes, some of these houses will not be affordable for some people, but people who are moving up to those houses will vacate houses at a lower price. It is a trickle through. Also, we've got to accept that if we are going to reach the housing numbers that we're required to build here in Medway, we will have to build on some agricultural land. There is no other way that it's going to be done. And it's not just on the Hoo Peninsula, it's also in the Capstan Valley. The Capstan Valley is predominantly agricultural land, and some of us could argue that it's actually of greater scenic value than a lot of the land on the Hoo Peninsula. And I passed that tonight on my way here. The backhoe diggers were still working on the roundabout going on to North Dane Way as I left home this evening. So I know people are going to be upset. Also, if we are going to provide a reasonable amount of affordable housing, as the previous application showed this evening, of brownfield sites. Give me another speaker, please. Thank you. As I was saying, the brownfield sites which have been given preference in the local plan will not provide sufficient numbers of affordable housing to meet the need of our people here in Medway. We are going to have to build on agricultural land where the building costs are lower. And I see that there is no way that we could turn this down and win on appeal. If we take this to appeal, it will cost this authority a small fortune. We're already in a precarious financial position as a council, and we, sitting in this chamber, don't have a overriding duty for all the residents of Medway, and to waste council taxpayers' money on a whim because we just don't fancy facing up to the fear we're going to get tonight from people here. We've got to face it. We need to provide homes. We've got a scheme here that is going to provide 760 homes eventually. We can't turn that down. We've got to brave the criticism. We've got to face, it's a difficult thing, I know, and I've had it in my own ward when I've tried to explain this to people. But those of us who are living in comfortable homes have got to think about those who haven't got that. By turning these sort of applications down, we are leaving so many people, particularly young people, in inadequate accommodation. And you can also see the effect of that on tonight's agenda, where yet again we have another application for an HMO, because that's the only type of accommodation, unfortunately, that a lot of people can afford to pay for. So I'm not making myself popular, I know, but we've got to face reality. We've got to face up that we've got to provide homes for people. We have a duty as elected members to do that. And whilst we are going to get a lot of opposition, I can feel that tonight, the reality is we've got to look after the greater community, the whole of Medway, not just people who feel upset because their view is going to be lost.
Thank you, Councillor Golvin. I now move over to Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. So I have grave concerns about this application from 4 different perspectives. The first is the infrastructure concerns. This is a significant development in a village and rural area. I am significantly concerned that the infrastructure is going to be overwhelmed. Second area is pressure on our land supply. I think this is a wholly inefficient use of land. Third one is to do with sustainability and the fact that we should be looking towards mixed communities. And the final area, the most significant one for me, is Medway's housing need and affordability are completely not in sync with this application. So we are looking at an application which is 44% 4-bedroom plus houses. That does not mirror what we require in Medway at all. We need to have smaller homes of 1 to 3 bedroomed houses and significantly more affordable homes across Medway. That is quite clear from our emerging local plan. 44% 4-bedroom plus houses is not compatible with what we need here for the residents of Medway. So, can officers justify how such a low-density scheme, dominated by 4-bedroom homes, meets the real housing needs of Medway residents today? That's my question. My second question relates to how does this support the creation of socially mixed, sustainable communities here in Medway? And my final question is, concerning, obviously, we have a requirement to make efficient use of the limited land that we have here across Medway. How does this make efficient use of the land that we have to work with? That's it.
Dave, you coming in on that?
Chair, thank you very much. Councillor Hamilton, thank you for your points and your questions there. In terms of our emerging local plan, this is a site in our emerging local plan. Now, the emerging local plan is working on delivering on our housing needs, as you quite rightly say, but that's over the whole plan, that whole plan area. Now, we started with a brownfield first, 40% of our sites looking for brownfield sites in our town centres, following government advice, and that's this government and previous governments, in terms of that. Now, that will achieve quite a high density, but not everybody wants to live in a flat. Not everybody wants to live at high density. So we've got to provide that mix over the whole area. We've also got to respect the character of the areas of those areas. So we're trying to achieve that mix of higher density, that mix of smaller units, but also with the larger units. To pick up the point that Councillor Galvin said in terms of enabling people to move up, to free up those smaller properties for other people, and to move up to larger properties. But in relation to high house stow, to provide for a mix which we feel is appropriate for Medway, appropriate for this area, but which is of a density and a design that is appropriate for this rural setting. So we need to do that. In terms of affordability, we've had reference to 30%. In relation to our local plan, for this part of Medway, the local plan is advising 25%. So it is consistent with our emerging local plan. And I do understand the point about sustainability and infrastructure, and rightly so. You know, when I've been doing the local plan roadshow, people have, right from all over Medway, have expressed concern about the pressure on infrastructure, be it schools, be it doctor surgeries, be it roads or whatever. The other, and what we're doing here through the recommendation, through the Section 106, is looking to deliver a scheme which helps us meet our housing need, and I'll come back to that a little bit in a minute, but also delivers the much needed infrastructure that's needed here, whilst also improving existing facilities within the village, providing the school with that multi-use games area, which will be open for community use. The school itself will be open for community uses. We will have business uses here. We'll have improved retail. We'll have improved community uses. But also importantly, there will be improvements to the existing open space and community facilities within High Housetown, which are fantastic, but they do need some improvements. And the scheme delivers on that. But I think one of the points that Councillor Galvin was, I was going to say trying to get across, I think you did get it across, Councillor Galvin, was our housing need for Medway over our local plan period is 24,000 homes. I can't hide 24,000 homes. They are going to have an impact. And we're trying to spread that impact across Medway. And I do understand the concerns of local residents that this is a large extension to the village. It's something that they appreciate and they value. And I understand that. I've seen land around where I've lived all through my life change in character with development coming forward. So it is going to have an impact. But this is a site which is in our emerging local plan. We feel that the scheme is right for this site with the necessary infrastructure It will have an impact. It will change the character, but we feel that this is the best we're going to do for Medway and for this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Now go over to Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation this evening, and thank you to the ward councillors as well coming along to talk to us. And it's probably at that point I should probably add that obviously there's been a representation from the independent group, so I just want to make it clear at this point that I've had no contribution to that, and I've not signed that letter either. I thank Councillor Hamilton for her points just now. I think she's raised very good points about the size of the accommodation that's going to be provided on this site, and just the size of the site is very clear when you look at the map. It's really concerning. I mean, this is not just an extension to a village. This is doubling a village, and I think if someone was to put in an extension to their home, I think we have planning sort of conditions on that we can only extend our home by 25%, is it? I think the maximum. Yeah, a village, we can double it. So that just seems a bit, quite off to me that we've got these conditions on, increasing a house, but not on the size of a village. Councillor Croser, I think, made some very important points about this coming forward ahead of the, emerging local plan, and that really does concern me as well. I appreciate, Dave Harris's comments about we have to still continue with our planning process. We can't just put things on hold, but there are clearly planning applications that are far more sensitive than others. We've just approved a lot of houses in Gillingham, and I don't think none of us had an issue with that. We saw on Brownfield site that made sense, and we do need to build some houses, but this is a very sensitive site raises lots of problems around infrastructure, schooling, food security. Very concerned about the lack, losing yet more fields where we grow food, and we're putting more people in, but we're taking away the then ability to feed those people. So that is a concern to me. And my final sort of point I wanted to make was around the schooling. So I'm looking at this, we're putting in a two-form entry school, and initially I was thinking, that's quite a good number of school places for this size of development. And I was trying to do some calculations, and then I realised that actually it'll have to take in the existing primary school. So it's not as many as what I was thinking. And I think, I appreciate there's people that do this day in, day out, and we've got government guidelines of what we provide, but it's something like 0.25 per dwelling or for the number of properties. So it's like, but again, with what Councillor Hamilton said with the size of properties, I mean, how is that calculated is that just number of dwellings, and then we look at 0.25 school places? Because if we're building 4-bedroom houses, there's going to be a lot more children in this development than there's going to be in the development in Gillingham, for example, where you've got sort of more flats. So I'm just concerned that actually there's not going to be enough school places with a two-form entry, having to take in the already existing primary school in High Halstow. And then I can't see any, but correct me if I'm wrong, I can't see any contributions towards secondary schools. So we're going to have a minimum of 100 children going into secondary schools as soon as this is completed, and I think probably more. You're talking about a good half of a whole secondary school, year group. So where are those children going to go? Because I think we've already got so many bulge classes in our secondary schools, which is really not a good way of educating our children in Medway. Thank you.
Dave, do you want to comment on that?
Chair, thank you. I'm going to cover the education part, and Pete wants to come back on the size of the properties and the need. Councillor Turpin raises some, as always, some good points regarding education. What the Council's education team has looked at, both in terms of the allocation in the local plan and what's included in this application, is what does the school need here? For a development of this size, in terms of the local plan allocation, not just this application site, there is a need for a one-form entry. Now, the existing village already has a one-form entry serving the needs of the existing village. What we don't want to see, and what would be inefficient, is to have two one-form entry schools. So we're combining them into a two-form entry, a new school, providing for the needs of the existing village and the expanded village as well. And the education team have done the calculations on that to advise me very clearly that this school will provide for the needs of that expanded community. We will have those added benefits in relation to the facilities in the school being open for the community as well, which I've touched on, but I know that you were just talking about the needs, quite rightly, Councillor Turpin. You have highlighted the fact that there is no secondary contribution, because what we want to achieve here is not only the delivery of the land for the school, but also the delivery and the construction of the school itself. Now, this is a whole new school rather than an extension to it, and therefore the contributions are more significant that's needed for that. So we're taking all the education contributions to deliver this new school, but we haven't forgotten the secondary school element. And once the new school here is open, that will free up the site where the existing school will be, and we will use money from the sale of that to compensate for the secondary part and help to either go towards a new school, a new secondary school, as set out in the local plan, or towards expansions of existing secondary schools. Thank you. I'll pass on to Mr. Hockney regarding the housing need.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. In terms of the housing need, and I think particularly the points that have been raised about the size of properties, the key thing to bear in mind is the council's own local housing needs assessment, which has been undertaken as part of the evidence base for the local plan, and has been essentially used to formulate the policies within that emerging plan, which has now been submitted for examination to the inspectorate following approval by this council. The size of property in terms of the percentage of new owner-occupied accommodation that's required in Medway, the largest amount that's required is for 4 or more bedrooms. That totals 4,841 new properties that are needed at 4 or more bedrooms for an owner-occupier tenure, which represents in excess of 31% of all owner-occupier properties. So members may say, well, this site is proposing more than that 31%. But as has been said by a number of members throughout the debate, in that it is unlikely that on urban brownfield sites there is the sufficient space to provide family housing. So using that rationale, one would expect more 4-bed properties on greenfield sites in order for us to get close to achieving the housing need that's been identified in our evidence base. So in terms of that amount, I think we consider it is appropriate for this site. In terms of the density and the best use of land, the proposals accord with the numbers that are put forward in the local plan policies. And again, we think that it is an appropriate way to develop this site without resulting in too high a density development. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Now go over to Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is a very sensitive subject. I understand that. I understand also what the ward councillors have said, that they are doing what they should be doing, representing their people. And I'm convinced that everything they said is genuine and it's not just done for political reasons. I'm sure it is all really felt. The concerns that people have in this area, I understand that as well. It is human nature to want to conserve what you love, what you care about. I will reference Councillor Sands. I also am very interested in history, but you cannot live within history. We literally have a responsibility to think about the future. I would like to seek, also referencing to Councillor Etheridge's concern, who said this before, I would like to seek reassurance from the officers that the resources will be put in for our team of officers to keep a very, very close eye on the developers and that they do what they said they're going to do. Because I've heard time and time again, I know Councillor Etheridge has got the history and the knowledge of when it's gone wrong in the past. So I think that's really, really important. I also do not like the fact there's a lack of affordable housing. I don't really buy into any trickle-down economics, although I understand the argument. I would have preferred otherwise, but it is what it is. My biggest concern that I have with this is, I felt the need to say this before, and I think we need to keep on saying it, that no matter how unpopular something is, no matter how much we dislike it, we can only turn down a planning application based purely on planning criteria. Now, you could argue, just for the show of it, we could turn it down, go to appeal. We will waste taxpayers' money in the tens of thousands, I would guess. Almost, the guarantee they will appeal, by the way, and I would expect they would win. What is the point in that? So I'm urging everybody here to come up with purely planning reasons why we should turn this down. Because even though I appreciate what has been said, I haven't actually heard anything that is specifically, we will turn this down because of this criteria. That is literally what we have to be able to do that. So hopefully somebody can help me with this, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I certainly would support the sentiments expressed by Councillor Peake and by Councillor Galvin earlier about the quasi-judicial role of this committee and about the dangers of going to appeal. There is, of course, the other danger identified by the Chief Planning Officer, so not only losing an appeal, but all these speculative applications coming down the line for large amounts of housing which aren't in the local plan, whereas this one is, of course, in the emerging local plan. But I particularly wanted to address the infrastructure point. We've heard about contributions towards the Four Elms roundabout and to education, but in light of the fact that some of the local members speaking complained about the amount of paperwork in the report and possibly not having had time to digest this, I just thought I'd emphasise some of the contributions which are listed here. There's £191,938 towards the provision of enhancements of community facilities within the High House Stow to benefit the local community and residents of the development, including but not limited to upgrades to the existing cricket pavilion, toilet block and village hall. Another contribution listed is £281,000 £55.60 towards improvement of civic space and gateways to High Houstow, including but not limited to greening, bollards, seating, lighting, paving, wayfinding and signage. Then the developer is promising £254,318.80 towards enhancements to existing and new sports and leisure provision within High Houstow, including but not limited to the purchase of additional land to improve existing sports provision within the village, upgrades to the existing cricket pavilion, toilets and village hall, and so on. And then there's the very large contribution, 2,042,211.20 towards the creation of additional capacity in social care, primary care and community care. And it breaks down in the report the contributions to each of these. So I think it's important to appreciate there is infrastructure funding there. And it's a reasonable complaint that infrastructure isn't built when new housing is built, but if this development were approved, these pieces of infrastructure are there, and as Councillor Etheridge rightly says, we should ensure that they're delivered.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other member? Councillor Turpin, yeah?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. It was just in response to the questions that I had earlier with regards to the secondary school. So, sort of one question and a point, I guess, is the existing school at High Houstow on Medway Council land then? Because if we're talking about selling it to then have the money for the secondary school provision, I'm just wondering what that scenario is. And then, I mean, that then suggests that there's going to be even more housing. If we're selling a school site, we're going to get more housing on it. So and then need more school provision. So could we just have those 2 points clarified, please?
Chair, again, good questions, Councillor Turpin. The school's existing school site is owned by the academy, but that academy will be taking over this this site, and there is an agreement worked up between our education team and them that site will be sold, and that money will be used towards secondary provision. So there is, I'm assured on that. And you're right. There's a strong possibility that site will be sold for housing, as comes forward on infill sites everywhere. But I do understand the reaction in the audience there to that. But you're quite right what you say in terms it's likely to be housing.
Any other member? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. I have not been convinced this evening for the arguments for this development to go ahead. I have been convinced that it should be deferred, simply because the reason is that all these documents, because I sit here quite blindly, I've not read them all, and I doubt very much if any of the planning members here have read all of those documents and understood them fully. So until we do, I don't see how we can possibly proceed with this. So I'm proposing a deferral.
I believe that if it was deferred, it could be taken to appeal for non-determination, and we'd lose that appeal, so that wouldn't actually solve anything. So we've got to make the decision tonight. Any other member? Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a very complicated and sensitive case, and I accept all that's been said from the ward councillors, from members on both sides. But ultimately, it's going to go ahead because I think, from experience and what we know within planning policy, as Councillor Peake said, and backed up by Councillor Jones, if we're following the policy, and I believe the officers have followed the policy, then there isn't a genuine reason why we need to turn it down. And I think deferring it would just pose more risks to the council, which I don't think I want to take. So, although there are certain questions which, as I say, the ward councillors have brought up, which need to be fairly responded to, I don't think there's enough reason to defer the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilbourne. Any other member? No. So I do feel for all the residents here tonight who have come to this committee and anyone else who hasn't, but there aren't any reasons for refusal that we haven't come across any. And I know change is difficult. Me, myself, I grew up in Lower Gillingham where I had a magnificent view of the River Medway. That's now gone, high-rise flats. We all have to take the brunt of developments. The land has been allocated in the emerging local plan for development. Therefore, this holds significant weight. As a planning committee, we need to show that we are serious here in Medway about meeting our housing needs. If we were to keep refusing planning applications without good reason to do so, inappropriate developments that have good reason for refusal are at risk of being approved at appeal. And that's the other important thing. We've got to remember the judicial reviews that we've got coming up, and we've got to win them. I feel for the residents, as I said, the impact that it will have, but we need to build homes. And as I said, it's a high chance it will lose at appeal. So therefore, I will be supporting this application. I now go over to Councillor Jones, Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Land to the east of High Housetown, I'm moving approval subject to A, Section 106 as set out, paragraphs 1 to 16 in the report, and B, the conditions as set out in the report, with the exception of condition 70, which is covered by the 106. So I assume that now reads sections, I beg your pardon, I'll repeat that, that means paragraphs 1 to 71, including the list of conditions there apart from condition 70. Conditions 44 and 45 on the local centre to be amended in accordance with the supplementary agenda, and condition 50 on the travel plan to be amended in accordance with the supplementary agenda. So that's conditions 44, 45 and 50 to be amended in accordance with the supplementary agenda. And I think, Chair, that is it. I move all that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Is that seconded? Those for?
That is 8, Chairperson.
Those against? The application is therefore approved. We'll just take a short break while the gallery clears. Welcome back to tonight's Planning Committee. We're now going to do agenda item 7, planning application for Shaftesbury House. Madeleine Mead, Principal Planner, will present in this. So over to you, Madeleine.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for Shaftesbury House, which is in Upnart, and it's for an application for the conversion of the building to 11-bedroom house in multiple occupation. If I could draw members' attention to the supplementary agenda, which includes change of description and amendment to the approved plan condition. This is a site location plan, just with the site outlined in red. It's aerial view, site outlined in red again. So attached to the property, as you could just see here, is an existing dwelling, and you've got the Arthur's Adventure Centre just to the east. This is a wider context plan, so the star identifies the site, and you've got boat storage and Medway Yacht Club along here. You've got the Arthur's Adventure Centre, public car park. You've got 2 public houses along here, and then further down you've got the Upner Depot, which is commercial business uses, and a bit further down is the torpedo sheds, which are commercial uses. So although not predominantly, the building is considered to be in a mixed-use area. So this is a view of the building from outside the Arthur's Adventure Centre. So this elevation fronts onto the river, onto the side elevation. This is a view of the building from up the road. This just shows the attached dwelling here and elevations of the building fronting the river and attached to neighbouring dwellings. So again, this is the existing dwelling and this is the building for conversion. And these are just some pictures of the public car park, which is adjacent to the Arthur's Adventure Centre. This is the existing floor layout. This is proposed ground and first floor layout. So it says existing and proposed, but they're both actually proposed. The ground floor is proposed for 4 bedrooms, a kitchen diner, breakout space, shower rooms and WC. And the first floor is for 7 bedrooms, 3 with en-suites and 2 shower rooms. The bedrooms would meet the requirements of the space standards for gross internal floor area, and a total of 84 square metres communal space would be provided, along with a garden area, so it's considered to provide future occupants with a good level of amenity. Proposed roof plan, it's proposed to have 44 solar panels on the roof. And these are existing and proposed elevations. There's very minor alterations externally. it would just relate to this elevation, which is the northwestern elevation. It's the addition of windows. And this drawing shows proposed 5 car parking spaces. So you've got 2 here, 2 along here, and 1 here. Any overflow parking could be accommodated within the public car park. The building has been empty for a number of years and was previously used in association with the Arrowviews Adventure Centre. The proposal is considered a good reuse of the building, and it is not considered that comings and goings of future occupants would be any greater than when the building was in use as part of the Arrowviews Centre. Overall, the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of principal, design, amenity and highways, and looking for a resolution to approve subject to the SAMS bird mitigation contribution being paid and is set out within the report and supplementary agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move over to Councillor Williams, who has 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair, members. Being a small riverside village of historical interest, in my opinion, if this application went ahead, it would be detrimental to the rural feel of the village and would be out of character with existing residential settlement. I think it's an overdevelopment of the site. The scale intensity of 11-bed HMO is completely out of proportion with the historic rural village setting and is not in keeping with the character of the area. It represents overdevelopment that would negatively affect the surrounding community. Some of the concerns raised, not enough public transport. Reliance on the car travel is essential for access to employment, education and basic services. The bus service is inadequate and the bus is running every couple of hours. No pedestrian infrastructure. There is no footpaths along the roads leading into or out of the village, making walking hazardous and impractical. Cycling limitations. The Medway tunnel prohibits cyclists, limiting sustainable transport options to nearby towns such as Gillingham and Chatham. I also feel to go against the Medway Local Plan 203 BN1, which states, being satisfactory in terms of use, scale, mass and proportion, details, materials, layout and sightings, and respecting the scale, appearance and of local location of buildings, spaces in the visual amenity of the surrounding area. And BNE2, which states all developments should secure the amenities of its future occupants and protect those amenities enjoyed by nearby and adjacent properties. Design of the development should have regard to activity levels and traffic generation. The extra traffic generated by the proposed application would have a detrimental effect on the amenities of local residents due to the narrow one road in and one road out of the settlement and extra vehicle journeys generated. Policy CF1, community facilities development, should be located where it can be adequately served by existing community facilities. Upton has a lack of facilities, in fact none. New residents would have to travel to the already oversubscribed local doctors, schools and hospitals. I feel also it's in conflict with the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 8, achieving sustainable development. Sustainable development requires that housing be supported by adequate infrastructure. The lack of essential services in Upton means that this proposal fails the social objective of sustainability. I repeat, it fails the social objective of sustainability. Paragraph 110, transport and highway safety. Developers should ensure safe and suitable access for all users. The proposal should increase traffic pressure on narrow village roads, creating unsafe conditions for local residents and visitors. It should be noted that there is also objections from Finsbury Exeter Parish Council and the Dickens Country Protection Society and dozens of residents. And I am in agreement with the majority of local residents that if this development is approved, it will be a devastating effect on the village and local community. If this application is improved, it may set a precedent for future HMO developments in the area, leading to a major decline in the character of the village. I ask this committee to refuse this application for the above things stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Now move over to members. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for the presentation. I think the issue for me is, the inadequacy of the parking provision. I think gets me on this one. We've got 13 13 rooms, likely 13 residents given the size of the rooms. There's 4 buses a day to and from Upnor. How on earth are you going to get anywhere, anyhow, particularly for a working person? Using other facilities, other public car parks doesn't necessarily seem to be an adequate way of managing this situation. So I'd just like to understand, is there anything we can do to ensure that there is more suitable parking? Because again, it's a village. Competition for parking on highways is going to increase, and I'm not entirely sure, but I'm confident that these proposals are really adequately thought through on the basis of transport.
And with regards to, I also understand that it did say somewhere about using the car park, but from what I've read about the car park, first of all, that's for visitors. Upnor gets very busy, and the car park isn't open 24 hours a day. And I did also read online, I don't know if that's still the case, but the car park is actually gated at 9 o'clock at night and opens at 8 in the morning. So that cannot be a parking provision, which I read somewhere, which was going to be. Did you want to come in about anything about parking?
Yeah, I just want to agree there are restrictions on the parking, but we don't, as a council, actually have current guidelines for parking provision for HMOs. So they're providing 5 car parking spaces, and it was considered that it is a public car park. It's not a pay and display. No, it's not open all the time, but provision could be made. They could park in that car park if required.
Where would they park from 9 o'clock though to 8 in the morning? Because it will be shut. So I'll go over to Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, I've got to say, I think this is a completely bizarre place to put an HMO. There's not enough parking, because you're talking about 11, I mean, there's 4 buses a day, I believe, that you're talking about 11 plus cars that have got, and 5 car parking spaces.
Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair. So let's quickly go over the key facts. You're driving down a narrow country lane. Oh, my voice is terrible tonight. You're driving down a narrow country lane, no lights, no pavements. You'll eventually come into the village, and there's a commercial unit on your right-hand side that has some fairly large vehicles coming through. You then come into a residential area where people are either parking on the road or on their own private parking space. You move through that and coming towards the Arethusa Centre, which we know is going to be developed sometime in the future because there's a proposal for luxury flats to go there. And then, of course, you have the people going into the yacht club, bringing their yachts and their equipment back and forth all the time. So this is a busy little road. Now, we've also heard just now the parking facilities of the visitors' car park. Not too well used in the winter, I will admit, but in the summer it's absolutely packed. It is a beautiful tourist area. So let's understand where we are with this historic little village down by the sea. It's surrounded on one side by the sea, on 2 sides by busy motorways. So I'm absolutely perplexed why you want to put an HMO there and give them cycle bays to park in. Where the hell are they going to cycle to? The end of the village and back? That is absolutely ridiculous. We've heard mention, of course, that there is no facilities there, which is true, except unless you're in the pub every night. So what's going to happen to these poor people? The only occupation they're going to have in the evening is either drive out that village using their car or go to the local pub. Now, I have a real concern about that because possibly, just possibly, we might have some people in there that have some other types of issues, vulnerable people. I certainly don't want to see them having the only facility they've got or entertainment is a pub every night. So, you know, that is just a terrible thing. Finally, I thank the report coming forward from the officer, but I'm absolutely astounded and frustrated by what's in it. Because it quite clearly says in there that it doesn't comply with the MPF on this particular paragraph. It doesn't comply with other bits and pieces. It states it very clearly in the report. So why the hell has this been promoted to be accepted? I'm certainly voting against it.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond-Shea.
Thank you very much. I think we need to just take a quick pause and start to reframe how we are approaching the people that live in HMOs. They're not all bad people. They're not all going to be up to mischief. I'm not talking about you. There's no point of order required because I was not referencing you. No, it doesn't require, it doesn't require.
Okay, please, can we carry on?
It doesn't need to be withdrawn because it wasn't directed to you. No, it was not. No, you're not listening. Listen to what I'm saying to you. Listen and calm yourself down. We need to take the heat out of the way we're addressing the residents who stay in HMOs. It doesn't diminish the spirit of what I want to say. That's why it's important to relax. With this application, I'm getting Lord of the Flies vibes, Big Brother vibes, because you're putting people isolated away from their communities, and you're moving away from what we're all striving for, which is social cohesion. So this is ridiculous, as my counterpart was reiterating. I'm not sure why he argued with me. Now he knows that we're on sync. It is completely disingenuous to put 11 people under such conditions. So I won't be voting for this at all.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with what everyone's saying because these are all the points that I picked up. Yeah, we'll do it. Because that was also my concern, which Councillor Hammond-Shea has picked up on. Looking at this, normal HMO does not have single beds. And it's got an office, so I'm not quite sure what they're planning to use it for exactly. But it is, as you said, vulnerable people, isolated, there's nothing around, no infrastructure, which then impacts mental health. Now we go to, did you want to come back, Councillor Etheridge?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. I completely what you say here and agree with what you say, social cohesion. So then I've thought about that. There is another issue here. If there's no social cohesion in that place at all, and they're separated from the things, that means, as far as I'm concerned, there will be a very high turnover of people coming into this place because they will come in, stay a few weeks and go. That is not a settled stationary life for them.
Thank you. Councillor Golvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a feeling I'm not going to make myself very popular again. This is an area I know very well. I used to, back in the 1980s, regularly be a member of the afterguard on the Ketch Arethusa, and the picture of the shed there with the blue doors brought it back. I spent many a happy winter's hour in there sanding and varnishing bits and pieces of the Ketch. I think overall, I think this is not a good place to put an HMO, but it begs the question, where are we going to accept HMOs? I've had members opposite arguing vehemently that they do not want any more in Gillingham. But there is clearly a huge demand for this type of accommodation. Unfortunately, a lot of our younger people are priced out of the private rental market. A one-bedroom flat in Medway goes for about £900 a month plus. A two-bedroom flat is about £1,200 a month. A lot of people who are trying to get the money together for a deposit on their own property need this type of cheap and cheerful accommodation. There's a lot of professional people who have just moved into an area and look to this sort of reasonably priced accommodation. So there is a demand for it, and we can't get away from that. And I think if we've got to get a reasonable policy, because at the moment we're arguing on one hand that there's too many in Gillingham and we can't put any there. We have one that is in an area that does not have any HMOs, and now we're saying, oh, we can't put it there because there's nothing for them to do. I think people will make their own choices. They will go where they want to go, and more importantly, they will go where there's the accommodation they can afford. And I must agree with Councillor Hamadishi that there is a bit of demonisation going on over residents in HMOs. There is no reason to assert at all that residents in an HMO would create any more disturbance to the neighbourhood than any large family with teenagers would make. So I think we need to get a sense of proportion on this. This is very, very balanced, and I think reluctantly I would actually vote for it, because I believe we need this type of accommodation. But I also believe as a committee and as a planning authority, we've got to get our act together with this. We've got to decide what we want to do about HMOs, because there is a huge demand for this cheap and cheerful accommodation out there. We can't just turn around and say, no, we're not having it, because that's going to put a lot of people down to sofa surfing, and that's the last thing we want people to have to do. So I'm going to I might as well say I'm popular this evening. I will reluctantly vote for this, only on the grounds that this this sort of accommodation is desperately needed here in Medway. But I will personally agree it is probably one of the most least suitable sites for an HMO that we've come across. And the same, it's an area I love. I've spent, as I say, many hours there, and I deeply regret the loss of the Venture Centre as well. I think that provided a wonderful facility for a lot of children from inner London and places that had a lot of social problems, and a week in the country and up there doing all sorts of activities, and the young people used to take out on the ketch. I think it did a huge amount of benefit. And I think Shaftesbury Homes should be ashamed of themselves, but that's another story. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Golvin. Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm possibly going to sort of reflect of what people have already said this evening. I think the biggest concern to me with this application is the location for this type of accommodation, and possibly another sort of late declaration of interest that I am an HMO landlord, but I don't think I've needed to declare that, because this is not sort of policy that we're making here tonight. We're just determining one particular application. So I hadn't mentioned it, but I mention it now just because sort of, just having that experience of that type of landlord, and just, it is the location ultimately that concerns me, because, people will probably not have cars, the majority of them, and as we've talked about, the buses in and out of Upnor are just not adequate to be able to get people about. So I'm just wondering who it would be suitable for. I look at the sort of the layout, the designs of it, and as much as it looks quite nice, a large kitchen, with a nice shared communal table, and a nice sort of games room with sofas and things. I just can't see that is just not the way people live, as much as we would like it to be. It looks a bit more like a youth hostel than an HMO. And I just don't know whether that's, the developer being sort of disingenuous about what they actually want to do with the property, or just having sort of, obviously you have to go to guidelines and put certain facilities in when you do these things. But to me, it just looks like very sort of short very short-term accommodation of, you know, an Airbnb or a youth hostel. So yeah, it just concerns me. It's just not suitable for the location of Upner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We all appreciate HMOs, there is a requirement. But in Upner, anyone who knows that little village in Upner, 4 buses a day, it's just the wrong place. And I looked at the drawings and I came up with the same thing as Councillor Turpin. I don't think they're places where people would stay, so there'd be a big turnaround. So I certainly wouldn't support this application down there.
Councillor Peake.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Several thoughts on this. I always think it's, in the name of accuracy, it's always a problem whenever we start labelling any groups of people, because it's just not accurate to do that in those sort of slurs or whatever. I'm not saying there were any intended, by the way, but if that can happen even most by accident, doesn't really help. When I was a Democratic officer for Barking Dagenham, I undertook surveys, and some of the properties I visited, the turnover of people in those HMOs was alarming, and they were off-grid. However, after immigrating back to this country, and I went from being homeless to living in an HMO, I think we had quite a stable group of people. However, they weren't, I don't think, Councillor Galvin, people in that category that you hoped for. I think it's accurate to say I was most probably the only one looking to move to better accommodation. The nature of the people there were people working incredibly hard, long hours, and sending money back home. And I don't think they ever would have moved on. So I'm not convinced that HMOs fulfills the role that you hope it might do. And getting to the main point, yes, we need housing, affordable housing. We've been saying this, but there has to be a benchmark that we don't go below. And this particular application, this one really concerns me for all the reasons that have already been expressed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other member? No. Go over to Pete Hockney.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to obviously all the points that members have made. I think it's just important to, I think, emphasise a few points. As Ms Mead mentioned in her presentation and the subsequent questions, we don't have parking standards for HMOs. So in terms of 5 spaces, members cannot conclude that they are below standard because there is no standard within the adopted policies. In terms of, I think, the type of accommodation, I think as we've discussed all evening, there is a requirement for a variety of accommodation across Medway. Obviously, in the last discussion, there was concern that the proposals had too many larger properties. So it's clear that across Medway there is a wide range of properties required of all different sizes, all different tenures, and HMOs are part of that requirement. Obviously, I don't need to tell members about the previous HMOs that were at committee where there was concern and refusals on the impact on the immediately adjoining neighbours from terraced properties of the increased comings and goings that members concluded. And obviously this property has no attached neighbours in that regard. So in terms of that disturbance, and as Ms Mead said in the presentation, the previous use is a significant consideration as well. The MPPF does require us to support the reuse of existing buildings. This is a vacant building that has been vacant for a significant amount of time, and its reuse would bring it back into use and propose a use that would deliver a sort of a type of accommodation that I think, as members have said, there clearly is a need for. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member? No. Okay, so I think I get the vibe that it's more going to be for refusal. So we need to come up with, I'll go to the vote first, but we do need to get a reason for refusal that we're going to use. With everything that's been said tonight, with it being in an unsustainable location, especially 4 buses a day, I can't vote for this application. I showed it to my son earlier today. He's 23 years old. First of all, he was like, no, kids need a HMO, need to live in one. We need this sort of thing. But then when I told him about the location, and he actually knows it himself, he's like, no, you can't live there. There's nothing around. It won't be good for people's mental health. So I will now go over to Vice Chair, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Shaftesbury House, Upner Road, Upner. Recommendation from officers is approval. Conditions 1 to 6 are set out in the report, but with existing condition 2 as amended by the supplementary agenda. I so move.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Those for the application?
That is 2, Chairperson.
Those against? Thank you. The application is therefore refused. So we now need to go to the vote for refusal of the application. Do we? Oh yeah, sorry, get some grounds. So with regards to, sorry. Okay, so members, we need to discuss grounds for refusal. So Councillor Williams, he did mention some, didn't he, in his thing that it goes against policies. So maybe we could that, and do we all agree that it's on an unsustainable location as well? So if we discuss it with planning and then they come to me with the reasons for refusal to be agreed. Is that agreed by members?
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think if we could just be clear about the scope of the reasons, I think from the room, and I think, as you say, it's the introduction of the HMO into a location which has a limited range of facilities and is considered an unsustainable location for additional population. But we can work on that if that's what members are sort of leaning towards. And I think it'd just be good just to explore if members did have anything else that they wish to refuse it on. I'm not convinced there is anything else, but obviously it's okay. The decision of the committee at the moment.
Councillor Field?
Yeah, I was going to go, obviously we haven't got parking standards, but we can talk about a lack of sustainable transport opportunities and the impact of parking on and amenity on local residents. That was...
Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you. I'd like to agree with Councillor Field, not just the lack of sustainable parking, but also the lack of sustainable public transport if they're unable to use a car or move anywhere. And then following on from that, we talked about amenities. There are no amenities there except for 2 pubs. That's it.
Yeah, there's no shops, is there? So they've actually got to leave there to get to the shops. Councillor Peake?
Well, I think Peter summed it up very well. That was the reason why I voted against it, is there's nothing there to sustain what I would call a decent life. And your point, Chair, about well-being really hit home for me, but I suppose that can be put in there. But if that could be, it captures somehow the lack of anything, basically, the void. And it will be a very depressing area to be in. So I don't know. I don't know if any of those words could be translated into refusal or not.
Any other member? No. So Peter, is that okay with what we've discussed and come up with? Yeah. Okay.
Just need to.
To agree with, yeah.
Okay, so I now move over to Councillor Jones, Vice Chairperson.
Well, what Councillor Jones, Vice Chairperson, was going to say was move refusal on the grounds as set out by the Service Manager Development Services and the additional comment by Councillor Field, and for the exact wording to be agreed by the Chair, Vice Chair and spokespersons.
Yeah.
Is that seconded? Right, those for refusal of the application.
That is 14.
And those against?
No.
Oh, right, the application is therefore refused.
No, that's all right. Yeah, but I think because it just needs a little bit of debate to get to the grounds for refusal. But we're fine.
We are.
Yes.
Okay, we'll carry on with the committee meeting. Just wait, Dave Harris is back. So we now go on to the last agenda item of the evening, which is agenda item 8, which is planning application, land adjacent to 50 Lime Court. Peter Hockney will be presenting this. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. This application site you can see outlined in red in this location. It's a site next to an end of terrace property on Lime Court in Wigmore. You can see the existing property outlined in blue and the site adjacent to it in red. And again, on the aerial photograph, you can see there's an existing extension which is on the application site at the current time. Again, here are the site photos of the flank elevation of the existing property, and again from the front. And this is a photograph again of the adjacent sort of parking area. These are the existing elevations and floor plans of the main property, where you can see the garden room located here is the part that's to be demolished as part of the application. The replacement dwelling, the replacement building would form a new dwelling attached to the existing property. And the floor plans show it as a 2-bedroom property with a lounge and kitchen diner at ground floor. Not dissimilar to the existing property, but obviously a 2-bed rather than a smaller bedroom 3-bed. The application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any members? Councillor Golvin.
I'm going to be honest, this sort of application in the past, I was absolutely dead against. You know, it's cramming, not planning, those sort of grounds. But I think really we've got to take a bigger view on this. Whilst, yes, it's only one property, but it's in an existing developed area. And all these odd ones here and there do add up to our housing numbers. It's not going to make a huge difference, I admit that. But in this particular case, there's no loss of vegetation or a nice tree there or something. I think, yes, I can't really see any grounds for turning it down.
Thank you. Any other member? No. Well, this application would normally be decided under delegated powers, but it's only come to committee due to the number of objections. I personally can't see anything wrong with this application, so I will therefore be voting for it. So I now move over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Agenda item 8, land adjacent to 50 Lime Court, Wigmore. The recommendations for approval subject to conditions 1 to 11 are set out in the report.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Those for? The application is therefore approved. Now that's the end of tonight's planning committee. Thank you, members and officers.